On the night of March 31st, 1997, Tanya Mullen was murdered at 2:45 a.m. Tanya was a student at Rutgers College and had been studying to become an English teacher. She was the ideal student, friend, and daughter. She was at the top of her high school graduating class. She volunteered at the local hospital and even donated $500 to cancer research foundations in honor of her mother. Tanya was a very active woman. She ran every day at 7 p.m. exact. One evening, she had been followed into the private park dedicated to Rutgers students only. In order to get into this park, you needed proof of identification that you're a current student at the school, which she had, and so did Thomas Applegate. Thomas Applegate had been a 21-year-old student studying in the field of medicine. He had been studying to become an anesthesiologist. The two had met once before the night of the murder. On March 29, 1997, Tanya had gone on her usual evening run at 7 p.m. exact, Thomas following behind her. After a good 10 minutes, Thomas decided to call out for her and ask for her phone number. When Tanya had said she was flattered but not interested, Thomas said it was not a problem and to have a nice evening, but this wasn't what he thought when he went home. He found himself having a dream about her that night and woke up to decide he wanted more than what she gave him. He was angry at her decline, so he took matters into his own hands. The next day, March 30th, 1997, he followed her again into the private park, this time with a washcloth drenched in chloroform. He had stolen a bottle of chloroform from his school lab, along with other chemicals for experimenting. Chloroform had been used as a form of anesthesia in older times, so he took the opportunity to take it from the lab. He took the washcloth from his jacket's pocket and placed it over her mouth. She struggled and tried to fight him off for about 10 seconds until she passed out and became unconscious. Thomas had carried her to his car parked just outside of the exit of the park. It was dark, so he was not concerned with being caught. He drove her to his apartment, just 5 minutes outside of the college campus grounds, dragged her into his home, and laid her on the couch as he waited for her to wake up. It took 3 hours for the chloroform to wear off, making it 10 o'clock p.m. now. When Tanya woke up, she began to panic, as she was scared of her surroundings. When Thomas realized she was awake, he tried to explain what happened. He told her they had gone running together, went back to his house to get drinks later, but then she ended up falling asleep. He made sure to explain why she was still in her running clothes. She hadn't remembered a single thing that happened after she entered the park, so she believed Thomas when he told her what supposedly had happened. When she finally was at ease with everything that had gone on, he asked if she wanted to go to a small late-night bar in the district. She agreed to this. When they arrived, it was about 11 p.m. The two had ordered beers, they had a great time, and as it came down to closing time for the bar, they decided to head out. They both had been extremely drunk. When they entered Thomas's apartment, it was about 2 in the morning. He asked if she wanted to stay the night, and she had said yes. She didn't want to go back to her dorm mainly because she didn't have a way of getting there, and she didn't want to wake up her roommate. The two had sat on the couch and began to make out. It started off okay, and then things took a turn for the worse. When Thomas became too involved, Tanya told him to stop. He had been rejected once by her and was not going to take no for an answer again, so he pinned her wrists above her head on the arm of the couch. She tried to get out of his reach, but had a hard time, so she kneed him. As he fell to the floor, she grabbed the glass lamp on the table next to the couch and brought it to his head, shattering the glass. He grabbed her ankle as she tried to make a run for the door, and she fell to the ground as well. They continued to fight until Tanya sunk her teeth into Thomas's arm as he tried to suffocate her. She tried to run for the door again, but he had grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed her in her shoulder. When she couldn't get off of the floor, he locked the door and carried her into his bedroom, tying her wrists to the bed frame. She pleaded for him to let her go, but he refused, screaming multiple profanities at her. He lit up a cigarette and ashed it on the bottom of her foot as she screamed in pain for help. He didn't want his neighbors to hear, so he grabbed a piece of black duct tape and taped her mouth shut. This was when Tanya knew she was going to die. He grabbed the same kitchen knife he had stabbed her shoulder with and began to slash her thighs in an attempt of making it look like she had self-harmed herself in a suicide attempt. When he realized she was finally dead, he removed the rope from her wrists and the piece of duct tape from her mouth. He placed both pieces of evidence into his nightstand drawer. He then picked up her body and dumped it into the trunk of his car. He drove back to the park where he found her and dumped her body off in a river, tying the cement block to her ankle in hopes of her sinking to the bottom. However, the river didn't go deep enough to completely submerge her body like he thought it would. He left and decided that her body would be eaten, pretending he had no worries. He left with no remorse. At 10 a.m. the next morning, a runner had been on his morning run and decided to stop. He said he sat on a rock in front of the river, taking a short break, when he heard an alligator and heard it eating something. He said the sounds were like a firecracker popping. He then saw it was eating a person. He dialed authorities as he backed away slowly, hoping he wouldn't be its next victim, not realizing she was dead before the alligator even got to her. When the police came to the scene, they cautioned off the area by the river and decided to speak to the park ranger. When asked about Tanya, he said he knew her and her family. He had gone to college with her father and were good friends. She had been coming here for years, he said. He told authorities he has a list of students who come to the park and records the times they enter and leave. He said he didn't know who the man behind her was, but he let him in without looking at his ID because he looked like a student and that was enough for him to be allowed to enter. He said he had blonde hair, was tall, and was a good-looking man. After interviewing the park ranger, authorities decided to scope out the students who went to the school who matched the description given. The authorities were able to narrow down the list to 2 men, Thomas Applegate and Bruno Chandler. They interviewed Bruno first about where he was the previous night. He explained that he was in his dorm room studying for a psychology test and ended up going to grab a coffee at 10 p.m. at a local coffee shop. When the police went to the coffee shop, they asked to see the video footage